Welcome to the Online Great Books podcast, brought to you by OnlineGreatBooks.com, where we talk about the good life, the great books, great conversation, and great ideas.
Hello, dear listener, and welcome back to the Online Great Books podcast. This is Brett, and we are about to continue with Scott and Karl's discussion of Shelby Foote's The Civil War, Volume 1, even though over a long enough period of time, I think there's going to be more Shelby Foote. So, you will hear Scott mention enrollment in Online Great Books during this conversation. Enrollment will be reopening in 4 days. They are currently full, but you can go to onlinegreatbooks.com, click the Get Started tab, and you can join the VIP waiting list if you wish. You can also read about how the program works and some frequently asked questions. And if you're on a browser like me, you will also just see Scott peeking up at you from the bottom of the frame. He has an explainer video there as well that's worth checking out. While you're there, make sure you're on the email list so you get updates, and we will return next week with something brand new. Thank you for listening. And here is part 2 of Shelby Foote's The Civil War, Volume 1.
You know, we'd already talked about how sort of magnanimous that Grant ended up being in victory. What about the magnanimity from Lee every day? You know, he's just so gracious to his subordinates, never takes credit for anything they do, so considerate of Jefferson Davis. You know, Davis was a little bit of a pain in the ass to. He was a military man himself. Well, Lincoln could micromanage, but I think Davis early on had a inclination to micromanage. Had trouble with some of his military help, and Lee understood that, and he would always sit down and take the time to write him a letter, receive him at the field of battle, talk to him, keep him in the loop. Just a super kind guy who seemed to care about all of the people involved, all of them. You know, and later on, after this war, you know, he ends up being the president of a university. Arlington National Cemetery is his ancestral home. They took it from him. And he ends up being a university president and just beloved. Nobody until 2014 had a negative word to say about that man.
Mm-hmm. Yep. If you're going to delete your history, maybe you ought to learn it first. I quote this all the time, Chesterton on liturgy. You don't just take things out of your liturgy just because you don't understand them. You're not allowed to take them out when you don't understand them. Well, you have to understand it, and then maybe you'll take it out. I mean, I wonder how many people at those statue smashing parties, if you asked them, when did the Civil War happen, could they get within 30 years? So then I started taking notes at page 451.
Okay, that sounds like a good spot.
Well, that's when Lee takes over command of the Army of Northern Virginia. But there's some things about, so I have some quotes from Jackson. Somebody said, "It's impossible. Don't say it's impossible. Turn over your command to the next officer. If he can't do it, I'll find someone who can if I have to take him from the ranks." Why he gave up whiskey? Why, sir? Because I like the taste. That's a good reason to give it up.
Old hard Protestant, man.
Yeah, he has his tactics. So Jackson is a fascinating figure. Nobody can beat him. They have no idea what he's doing. And the tactics on 464, always mystify, mislead, and surprise the enemy if possible. And when you strike and overcome him, never let up in the pursuit so long as your men have the strength to follow. For an army routed, if hotly pursued, becomes panic-stricken and can then be destroyed by half their number, which he would do. The other rule is never fight against heavy odds. Of any possible maneuvering, you can hurl your own force at only a part, and that the weakest part of your enemy, and crush it. Such tactics will win every time, and a small army may thus destroy a large one in detail, and repeated victory will make it invincible. So there you go. That's exactly what he did. In that Valley campaign, they never knew where he was. They'd hide behind mountains. He would have people march out where they could see him just to pretend that he was there. He wouldn't tell his subordinates where they were going because of the cigar wrapper problem, which hadn't happened yet.
This is the upshot of the Valley campaign. Application of these strategic principles, Karl just read them to us. plus, of course, the blessing of Providence. He always attributed his victories to the blessing of Providence, particularly in the form of such meteorological phenomenon as cloudbursts and hailstones large as hen eggs, had enabled Stonewall, with 17,000 troops, to frustrate the plans of 60,000 Federals whose generals were assigned the exclusive task of accomplishing his destruction. 4 pitched battles he fought, 6 formal skirmishes, and any number of minor actions, all had been victories. In all but one of the battles, he had outnumbered the enemy in the field anywhere from 2 to 17 to 1. The exception was Cross Keys, where his opponent showed so little fight that there was afterwards debate as to whether it should be called a battle or a skirmish. Most of this had been done by rapid marching. Since March 22nd, the eve of Kernstown, his troops had covered 646 miles of road in 48 marching days. The rewards had been enormous: 3,500 prisoners, 10,000 badly needed muskets, 9 rifled guns, and quartermaster stores of incalculable value. All these things were things that he could hold and look at, so to speak. An even larger reward was the knowledge that he had played on the hopes and fears of Lincoln with such effect that 38,000 men, doubtless at first a first relay, soon to have been followed by others, were kept from joining McClellan in front of Richmond. The guy was a giant.
Yeah, amazing stuff that he did. Well, more good writing from Foote on the next page about his troops. All they got in return for their sweat and blood was victory. It was enough. Just perfect little sentences.
Wherever he rode, he was cheered. That'd make him take his hat off, they'd say, when they saw him coming. Hungry as they often were, dependent on whatever game they could catch to supplement their rations, they always had the time and energy to cheer him. Hearing a hullabaloo on the far side of camp, they laughed and said to one another, "It's old Jack or a rabbit." Something I noticed about Foote, Karl, is that from time to time, he'll tell a story about some officer. Typically, he never says it'd be an officer who's not up to the task, that either is incapable of dealing with it. I don't mean Pope; they're typically majors or less, or are stricken with some sort of cowardice. And then he doesn't name them. Did you notice that?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, he would tell these stories. Let me see if I've got one here. Let's see. The leader of McDowell's advance had surprised the Fort Royal garrison, a regiment of Georgians, whose colonel fled at the first alarm, leaving his men and $300,000 worth of captured goods to be scooped up by the Yankees. Jackson interviewed the runaway colonel that night. "How many men did you have killed?" "None." "How many wounded?" "None, sir." "Do you call that much of a fight?" And put him in arrest. Fortunately, the senior captain had taken command, burned the supplies, and brought the troops out. Anyway, he doesn't name that guy. And I noticed him doing that several times. I love that about him. I can't fault a guy that would run.
Well, he might have had family.
I have no idea. Well,
no, but you name him in the story. Doubtless. Okay, so the sources for this, which he talks about a little bit in the end of the book, there are, I can't remember what it's called. I found a link to it on the internet a while back, and I've got it bookmarked, but there's this huge set of the official correspondences from the Civil War. So you can get battle reports for everything that happened.
Yeah, it's like 129 volumes or something. It's huge.
I was sitting in, we went to Jefferson Davis's house in Mississippi when we were there, which is an interesting house. It was given to him. He had been in prison, and it was given to him by a woman who was dying of cancer, and he lived in it for a couple of years.
Who was that
So anyway,
woman?
that's where the museum is in the library.
Who was that woman?
Who is that woman? I forget her name, but she's a relative of Walker Percy.
Yeah.
Interesting. They all knew each other. You get the feeling in the 1860s, everybody in the country knew each other. It's like a Star Wars universe. But I was sitting there in the library, and these volumes were on the shelf, and I just pulled a few of them down and started flipping through them. You could spend a lifetime reading that, and it's fascinating. So, in other words, this colonel has a name, and he chooses not to reveal it. Well, if you're writing the official book of the history of the Civil War, what I'm saying is Foote might have said, well, he might have known the guy's family. Do you want to memorialize cowardice by name? Maybe not.
Maybe not.
If anyone really wants to know who it is, they can look it up.
Right. But, he doesn't want to cast aspersions on the family. But also, that wasn't my thought. I think you're probably right. That's probably what Foote was thinking. But my thought is that he just doesn't blame them.
That's another way to read it, too.
He doesn't blame him. I can't blame that guy. I have no idea what that's like. Jackson did. And Jackson arrested him. And that's for Jackson to do. But I can't do that. Because I'm not him.
Mm-hmm.
That's another thing that endeared me to Foote. Is that he doesn't...
Endeared Foote to you?
To me, yes. I hope I'm endeared to Foote. I don't even know what to do about this book. You could just endlessly sort of armchair quarterback this thing. All the whatabouts or why didn't they or second guessing.
Yeah, I have another line that I like. There's a bunch of them. There's a story of Jeb Stuart riding around his father-in-law in the dark. But 485, but Lee no more considered turning back, apparently, than McClellan had considered moving forward.
Yeah.
Another perfect sentence. You get the character of these two men. Lee is he's not going to budge. He's defending Richmond. And McClellan's not too excited about attacking Richmond, which he never actually did.
He never actually did. And he had it in the palm of his hand.
Yeah.
There at 5:15, I wrote here, McClellan would take no chances. He need not. The North didn't need to take any chances. I think McClellan's right.
Well, they did. There's an election coming up. There's a congressional elections, which the Republicans lost in 1862.
The midterms.
The midterms. So in wars which America fights, the commander-in-chief is a political officer.
Is that a good idea?
Well, we tend not to prosecute wars to the finish. We tend to not want to do it because, well, I don't know. Canada, that's not a democracy, but can a democracy actually fight a war?
No.
We haven't done so well recently. You know what I mean? I don't want to get into current events. But so Lincoln's desperate. He needs McClellan to win something. And McClellan is saying, well, no, I don't want to lose. Right. I'm the only thing between the Confederacy and Washington, D.C., which he was. So the stakes are high. If he loses, let's say he screws up and Jackson and Lee and Longstreet, they tear him apart, because that does happen sometimes, where armies lose so bad that they're no longer armies. Let's say that happens. Then it's open to cross the Potomac and take Washington, D.C., and then you've lost. So his caution is... After you said that, I started rethinking McClellan, because he's usually portrayed as the GOAT.
Yeah.
And not the greatest of all time, but just the GOAT.
Yeah. I don't think that he got to my conclusion for the same reasons. He's there coincidentally. Like he wants to prep. He does like inaction. He does like drilling and training. He's not a scrapper like Jackson, but that's okay. It works. He's right. I don't think you need to fight it.
Well, his intelligence was very, very bad. The Pinkertons continually overestimate the number of Confederates that are there.
The Blackwater of 1862, the Pinkerton organization.
Yeah.
So Alan Pinkerton is the guy's name. We Never Sleep. His detective agency was under contract for McClellan to essentially be Northern operatives or spies and gather intelligence on the South. Not a government agency. Maybe that's good. Maybe it's not. I don't know. But they're not. It's a company, and they were on the payroll. Now, if you are on the payroll, do you think it behooves you to give intelligence reports that make your boss want more information? or less information. I think they have the incentive to over-report numbers. That's what I'm saying.
Mm-hmm. Well, this is a common thing for those in government service. You never are going to make a budget request that is under. You're always going to go over. And your budget has to go up every year to justify your existence.
Yeah.
So there's a tendency to do that, for sure.
Yeah, the Pinkertons using them was the wrong move. He doesn't talk about that in here, and I've never heard anybody else say it, but I did a book report on a biography of Pinkerton when I was in the 6th grade, Karl. How about that?
I bet that it is well done.
Did you like when Stuart lost fell asleep on the front porch of that house, and they got rousted out, and he lost his hat to the Northerners?
Yeah, but then he gets the other guy's coat.
Yeah, so Jeb Stuart,
yeah,
a dashing character with his silk-lined cape and his felt hat with the brim turned up and an ostrich plume. Baddest, most stylish, handsomest, swashbucklingest cavalryman that ever lived. Lost his hat because he got startled in his sleep. And they were making fun of him. The Northerners were making fun of him and passing his hat around, and he was outraged. And then he and his men run around Pope's rear and ran into the headquarters camp. I mean, like 1,700 horsemen run into the camp and sacked General Pope's camp. It would be like if somebody sacked Eisenhower's camp after D-Day and took Pope's coat and hat and everything. It's glorious. Glorious.
So this is another reason why, and I don't know if this happens anymore, but, like I say, my grandfather was one of them. There are people that get absorbed with this war.
I am.
And will end up studying everything about it. Maybe they end up as reenactors or something. It's fascinating. If you study World War II, who are the great characters? I mean, nobody's going to allow any of these generals to be as crazy as Stuart.
Patton tried, and then they killed him.
And nowadays, they're all middle management types. I mean, Patton was kind of crazy, and they set him down for a while. And we have middle management desk people.
Yeah.
Well, not in the Civil War. I mean, these people might be like a 28-year-old brigadier general. They all have personalities, and you can see them, and it's very entertaining.
I could just look at pictures of Stuart for hours. Just love it. Just the coolest dude ever, man. So they hand McClellan his hat in the 7 days, run him off of. By the way, they win the Revolutionary War just 65, 70, what is it? I don't know, 80 years earlier at Yorktown.
Mm-hmm.
Richmond's just right up the road from Yorktown. It's like a 1 day's horse ride from Yorktown to Richmond, and the North has the Army of the Potomac situated there on that peninsula, pressing on on Richmond. It's the same battlefields. It's Cornwallis and Washington. It's the same fucking dirt. And it's all of their grandkids, mm-hmm. By the way. Lee's granddad was in that war. He's married to one of Martha Washington's kin. Like, it's the same people.
Jefferson's grandson is in this war.
Yeah, Jefferson's grandson's the Secretary of War for the Confederates, I think. He's a Randolph.
Randolph, yeah. I think his name is.
George Randolph. It's the same stuff. McClellan gets pushed back down this peninsula.
Yeah. And there's another thing which struck me from this book. This is a general, not specific thing. To get a sense of the quickness of the change. So, 1776, Declaration of Independence, George Washington is doing generaling in a powdered wig. I don't know if he wore the wig when he was out there, but there are no railroads. Life is very, very different. So, 1776, and then 90 years later, 90 years, that's a long lifetime. You have this other war. Well, all the railroads that they were fighting over, the first railroad was 1823, something like that. all of these railroads that they're fighting over to get supplies in are brand new. They're within living memory. Everything is changing. The weapons are changing. I was going to go down a rabbit hole and do the weapons, but I didn't have time to do it. You know, what weapons they're fighting with, what sharpshooting rifles they have, which are brand new. So you have Confederate sharpshooters. There was no such thing before then.
At some point in here, Shelby says, everything in the nation was new except sin.
Yeah, it's just a frantic development of the United States of America on this continent. And to go to the slavery issue was not objectionable to the northern states until it was. And why does it become objectionable? Well, you could say it's because of the moral development of the people. Good. That's right. Fine. People should not live in bondage. I agree. But they were still buying that cotton. But when you have mechanization, then you don't need cheap labor.
Yep.
And now you have the luxury of having moral qualms about it.
Yeah.
So I'll give you an example. If you own an iPhone, your iPhone was made in Foxconn. Is that the name of the company that makes them?
Yeah.
Foxconn in China, in a factory which has trampoline nets around the building because so many of its employees were leaping to their death because of the conditions in the factory. I'm not making that up. So, do you support the bondage of the workers in China? I guess you do. Now, if it became the case that iPhones could be made completely by robots and not by those humans, then probably you would find it much easier to oppose the enslavement of people in China to make your cheap products.
You could get real sanctimonious.
Do you know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
Morality often follows economics. And so the South was doomed because their way of life was doomed because of the technological advances. And their way of life, which was formerly acceptable, perhaps with a sniff, to people like John Adams, becomes completely unacceptable.
Did you see the quote from my beloved Thomas Carlyle in here? I'll do this from memory. He said, the South preferred to buy their servants for life, and the North preferred to buy them by the hour.
Yeah, I saw that. It's complicated, is what I'm saying. And you can look back and say, me reading this book, I am very pure and would never have done any of the things that these people do. Well, check your conscience. Check all the stuff in your house. Who made it? When you go shop at Walmart because it's cheapest, what are you supporting?
A great number of people living on no money a day.
Yeah, and not free to quit. So slaves. So there you go.
Yeah, if a wage changes hands, it's not slavery, Karl. You see? Like if a wage doesn't change hands and you have to work, then you're a slave. But if I give you a single penny, it's not slavery. It's the free market. I gave you a penny, and then you didn't have to take that penny, Karl. You could have done something else.
Does that make your conscience free?
Yes. Yes, that's what libertarianism does. It lets me sleep like a baby and ignore all nuance. Yeah.
Oh, gosh. Yeah, I'm sorry. I can't ignore all nuance.
Well, you're not a libertarian. If we ever had the free market, though, you could ignore it because price would contain all information, moral, ethical, and otherwise, and everything would be priced in. You wouldn't have to worry about it then. So at the end of that 7 days campaign, Lee masterfully somehow rope-a-dopes all the way down the peninsula and runs McClellan off, which is amazing. Lincoln's rattled. 533 below the 3 stars there, Karl. This is going to be a harder war from here on out, and Lincoln knew it. He knew it because he was going to make it so. In fact, He was going to make it just as hard as he had to, and he said as much, quite frankly, to anyone who asked him. Most particularly, despite conflicting advice from McClellan and men like him, it was going to be harder on civilians. Of the 4 actions which the general had said should not be contemplated for a moment: 1, confiscation of property; 2, political execution of persons; 3, territorial organization of states; and 4, forcible abolition of slavery. The first and second had already been carried out with government sanction. The third was in legislative works, and the fourth was under urgent consideration. The second...
Yeah, so McClellan had sent this letter in of his political opinions, and McClellan, I say he probably loved his soldiers too much. He loved the South too much. He did not want to do these horrible things.
Yep.
To confiscate their property or execute them or reorganize their states or uncompensated emancipation. He didn't want to do these things to them. And Lincoln's, they're doing all of them.
Lincoln's like, I'm going to make it as hard as I need to or want to. Spoons Butler, Karl. Spoons. So...
Why is he called Spoons?
Because he will steal the family silverware from you. He was the occupational governor of New Orleans, or of Louisiana. He was stationed in New Orleans. I have been to the Confederate States of America Civil War Museum in New Orleans, and you should go there because the losers don't get to have museums very often. They'll burn that fucker down just like they have done with so many statues. So go while you can. It's not too far from the World War II Museum down there. They're not very kind to this day to Spoons Butler. There is a collection of Benjamin Butler chamber pots there. It was a fashion of the day to deuce on the likeness of Benjamin Butler in the bottom of the chamber pot. People hated his guts. So, Lincoln said he's going to make it as hard as he needed to on the people. Then just below that, Benjamin Butler reasoned at any rate when he reached New Orleans and found that the national ensign, prematurely raised over the mint, had been ripped from its staff by the mob. They have insulted our flag, torn it down with indignity, he notified the War Department. This outrage will be punished in such a manner as, in my judgment, will caution both the perpetrators and abettors of this act, so that they shall fear the stripes if they do not reverence the stars in our banner. As good as his word, Butler found a man still wearing a tatter of the outraged bunting in his buttonhole, brought him before a drumhead court, and carried out the resultant sentence by hanging him in public from a window of the building where the crime had been committed. The women of New Orleans famously hated his fucking guts. They still do. The ones that are from there know anything about it. And if he was walking down the street, they'd cross the street, get away from him. They drew their skirts aside to escape contamination, he said, or they would talk crap at him. Somebody emptied a slop jar onto Admiral Farragut in the quarter at one point. And after that time, Butler retaliated with a general order directing that hereafter, when any female shall, by word, gesture, or movement, insult or show contempt for any officer or soldier of the United States, she shall be regarded and held liable to be treated as a woman of the town plying her vocation. They would treat them like whores, with all that entails.
Mm-hmm.
With all that entails.
Yeah. I don't know what to say. It's the war. It's a hell of a thing. The political killings really bug me.
It's Lincoln. Lincoln says, the people of Louisiana, all intelligent people everywhere, knew full well that I never had a wish to touch the foundations of their society or any right of theirs. With perfect knowledge of this, they forced a necessity upon me to send armies among them, and it is their own fault, not mine, that they are annoyed. What? Listen, if you agree with him, all the better. He was an absolute tyrant. And if you agree with him, that's what you want.
Well, okay. Let me argue with myself. Because I was going to agree with you.
Then you're arguing with me.
I'm arguing with myself.
Okay.
Northerners are executed too.
Yep.
Davis suspends habeas corpus too.
Yep.
There's, Andersonville prison. There's horrors all over the place. If Lincoln's a tyrant, Davis might be a tyrant too.
That's fine.
And so you can ask yourself, do I not like tyrants? Or do I not like tyrants who are not on my side?
I don't like tyrants and I particularly don't like them if they're not on my side. And in addition to that, I particularly hate it if they are never treated as tyrants and our government teaches them that they are sainted. I like it when they're called what they are. And the suspension of habeas corpus in the South and the introduction of conscription is a big, big, big problem for me.
Yeah.
There's no question about it. But I don't have to ever deal with sixth grade history teachers who are Jefferson Davis apologists.
Nope, you certainly don't.
So I don't have to worry about that too much.
Good luck getting a sixth grade history teacher who would even know who Jefferson Davis is.
That's true. But, when I was a kid, like the first, not in kindergarten, but definitely in first grade, you'd go in there, and at the top of we had blackboards back then, and above the blackboard was corkboard, like maybe 12 or 18 inches wide all the way across the room, and they would have the ABCs up there written in cursive and the number, the ones. They had them there back there, or did you guys have a slate?
Yeah, we had them.
Coal shovel? Slate. And they would buy these stupid things at the teacher's supply place or whatever, like these decorations. And there would always be a Lincoln and there would always be a Washington up there. Every time.
Mm-hmm.
Washington was Virginian. First. Whatever. Page 535. So in 1862, he's already throwing around emancipation. He's trying to figure it out because he's Machiavellian. He'll do anything he needs to do to preserve the Union. Nah. The unplayed card was emancipation, mindful so far of his inaugural statement. This was his inaugural statement. I have no purpose, directly or indirectly, to interfere with the institution of slavery in the states where it exists. I believe I have no lawful right to do so, and I have no inclination to do so.
Yeah, that's the inauguration. Foote goes on, he resisted mainly on practical grounds, considering the probable reaction in the border states. We should lose more than we would gain, he told one Jacobin delegation. So the reason not to emancipate is because he's got to keep the border states in.
It's just political calculation. He's not the great emancipator. He's not. And I'm not a slavery apologist. I'm just tired of this fucker getting this free pass. I'm sick of it. We can't understand anything if we don't understand this. I'm tired of the one-sided story. Can I change gears for a moment, Karl?
Sure.
Chris sent us an email. He says, Scott and Karl, first off, OGB is my favorite podcast. I found your podcast through the Art of Manliness podcast years ago, and I've listened to most of the episodes multiple times now. I always pick up something new and interesting about truth, beauty, and goodness. In case you feel like you're shouting in the wind, I wanted to communicate the tangible impact you both have had on at least one soul. When I uncovered your podcast, my life was on a path, the neo-American dream, you might say. I just finished my MBA and landed a good, though objectively meaningless job at a Fortune 500 company where I'm sure I would have put in my 35 years, gotten my gold watch, entirely missed my children growing up, and never thought twice about what life was for. The first and second and third time I listened to the podcast on self-reliance, I cried when Scott read the part about the sturdy lad from New Hampshire or Vermont who in turn tries all the professions, who teams it, farms it, peddles, keeps a school, preaches, edits the newspaper, goes to Congress, buys a township, and so forth in successive years, and always like a cat falls on his feet. It is worth 100 of these city dolls. I was a city doll. I went to college, joined the military, went back to college, and sold my soul to a mega corporation. After several months of dealing with the government and corporate overreach associated with the COOF, I'd had enough. I finally got engaged and married my fiancée. Sorry, Scott, I didn't hire a private investigator, but we'll see how it plays out. And took Scott's advice about kids. Our first is due in March. I quit my job without a backup plan and moved to Northwest Arkansas, not too far away from the cultural mecca of Tulsa, Oklahoma. I've since started working as a small business consultant, helping build small businesses in the local community. I don't know what the future holds for myself and my family, but I can say with clarity that without the convictions that I developed from listening to and considering the topics you discuss, that would not have happened without that. Today, I've reread Homer and Aeschylus and Plato for the first time. And truth, beauty, and goodness are essential considerations in my life, and that would certainly not be the case if I hadn't discovered your podcast, et cetera, et cetera. Thank you. There you go. Thanks, Chris.
Yeah. my joking response was, sorry we ruined your life.
Right.
Yeah, we appreciate that. People, it's good to know that people are listening. I hope we're doing you some good. Which, doesn't mean agree with us. That's fine. Whatever. It means thinking, at least making your thoughts your own. I had a thought. I was annoyed. You wrote a blog post on this, where people they've come up with this thing, content. Content creators. Content. I'll tell you, I generate content usually every morning.
At 9. Mine's at 9. When's yours?
Usually a little earlier than that. And then I flush it, and it goes away. Content is a product. Content is something that you could restrict, or shut off or whatever. That's not what we're doing. We're generating thought if we're doing anything. So it took me a while for your blog to really piss me off, but then it did.
Yay!
It's thoughts. And so if you're going to, the people that want to cancel people because it's the wrong kind of content or misinformation or something. No, let's label it what it is. It's thoughts that they want to shut off. And what we do here is thoughts of our own, you and me together, and if it produces thoughts within you, dear listener, mission accomplished. If your thought is, Karl is crazy about Jefferson Davis or something, fine.
Yeah.
Great. I hope you have reasons for it. The whole point, part of the point is, then you can do what Chris, the emailer, did, and you can decide whether you want to live the life you're living or not. And if you're thinking, rather than just going along in the cultural content flow, then you might be free to make some better decisions. I don't even know what those will be.
You'll be wrong. It's okay.
But you'll have done something.
You'll have done something. You'll have done it for a reason of your own, a reason of your own. No, that content thing bothers me. People, well-intentioned, very nice people will send me an email and says, thank you for all the content. And they're not being nasty, but it's not content. I get upset on every one of these fucking shows. I do. These books wear me out. I cry on a third of these shows. My blog at scotthamburg.com, it's not any good. I don't edit anything. It's full of typos. I'm not going to say I put it all out there, but I write the things I feel like I needed to write that day to not explode. It's not content. And I hope you don't generate any content, whoever you are. Do something that matters to you. Hopefully it'll matter to somebody else. But even if it doesn't, it mattered to you. Don't do content. I don't even know what the analytics are on my blog. I have no idea how many people look at it. It might just be you.
No, it shows up. People don't understand what a wrestling match thinking is. Thinking is not the same thing as opinion.
No.
It's not the same thing as feeling, where you can watch a movie and feel pleased. Well, that's not anything. Thinking is, it's Jacob wrestling with the angel and waking up exhausted and building an altar. That's what thinking is. Thinking is Rocky and Apollo Creed. I know that's fake. It's a movie, but
this book wore me out. I cried over this book several times. It's really stressful to do what we do. Let me just tell you how hard it is to do what we do. The Civil War, 150 years later, almost 160 years later, is still red hot. It's probably hotter now than it was in the 1970s, And so I'm reading this, and I know I'm going to have to talk about it in front of people. A little spooky. There is a chilling effect. I'm never able to say all the things I want to say. There is a chilling effect on speech today. And it's nerve-wracking. and I need to know what it is I want to say as I read it, because I have to think it through, and I'll change my mind. 2-3 years from now, I won't listen to this again, but I'm sure my takes won't be the same. But it ain't content.
Right.
I want to read you another one from Ted.
Just going to give a quote about, since we were talking about Lincoln, and we'll get to you, Ted, in just a sec. About the Emancipation Proclamation, you probably ought to go read it and see what it actually does. It does not free all the slaves. And so Foote writes another great sentence. He would go down to posterity not primarily as the preserver of the Republic, which he was, but as the great emancipator, which he was not.
Yeah.
That's a fair sentence about Lincoln.
There are hours of Foote on YouTube singing Lincoln's praise. He's so even-handed about it. So I believe he's being fair. Ted says, he's been listening for a while, and he says, I have a barbell and a rack, and I train when I can, but sometimes I'm busy, and sometimes I'm just a pussy. He says, I live in Wales and have a sheep farm that I run with my beautiful wife, and we're expecting our first child next year. Thanks to you, we are setting up a CSA veg scheme and hoping to sell more meat directly whilst adding poultry, pigs, and beef to our system. We have been intensively grazing for a while and have highly sought-after genetics in our flock. But everyone around us thinks we're crazy. To make ends meet, I also work more or less full-time hours as a self-employed plasterer. I don't know if that's a trade where you guys are, but I hope to end this once we can generate enough income from the farm so I can raise my family and my livestock full-time. Thanks for doing what you do, because it's made a big difference in my life. By seeing someone else seek truth and talk about the hard things, it has allowed me to become decoupled from boring, mediocre moderation that seems to be installed in most of us. He says, keep at it.
We have drywallers, not plasterers.
Yeah.
It's hard to find a plasterer. When we have old buildings that still have it, you just can't find anybody that knows how to do it.
Hire Ted if you can.
I think this book's just going to beat us into submission. I don't think we're going to tie a bow on it.
No, you can't. For a moment, the South had Maryland. I wanted to read this from Jefferson Davis. It's on 665 there, Karl. Thereafter, Second Manassas. We had Maryland for about 11 minutes. See, I said we. All you iTunes reviewers. The proclamation was addressed to the people of Maryland. The people of the Confederate States have seen with profound indignation that their sister state deprived of every right and reduced to the condition of a conquered province. We have long wished to aid you in throwing off this foreign yoke, to enable you to enjoy the inalienable rights of freemen. We know no enemies among you, and will protect all of every opinion. It is for you to decide your destiny freely and without constraint, and while the Southern people will rejoice to welcome you in your natural position among them, they will only welcome you when you come of your own free will.
So that's a statement of the Confederate position. I want to give you the other side. Page 800. Yeah, sorry, I was looking at the wrong page. Massachusetts Colonel wrote home to his governor from Beaufort, South Carolina. He added, I hope I shall do something in the great fumigation before the sulfur gives out. Just what it was he was proposed to do with regard to those he called our southern brethren, he announced while waiting at Annapolis for the ship that brought him down to the coast. Do we fight them to avenge insult? No. The thing we seek is permanent dominion. And what instance is there of permanent dominion without changing, revolutionizing, absorbing the institutions, life, and manners of the conquered peoples? They think we mean to take their slaves. Bah! We must take their ports, their mines, their water power, the very soil they plow, and develop them by the hands of our artisan armies. We are to be a regenerating, colonizing power, or we are to be whipped. Schoolmasters with howitzers must instruct our southern brethren that they are a set of damned fools in everything that relates to modern civilization. This army must not come back. Settlement, migration must put the seal on battle, or we gain nothing. That's an interesting quote from a colonel in the Union Army.
Yeah, that's not a proclamation from the president like the one I read from Davis, but I think that sums it up. Now, whether that's what Lincoln wanted or not, that's the effect of it. How could he have denied that?
Yeah, and if you think that slavery makes it worth it, that's fine. That's what I'm saying is you should realize it was a subjugation. Subjugation means walk under the yoke. It was a subjugation and a remaking of a way of a people's way of life. And you can say that the evil of bondage justifies it. You may be right. There's evils all over the world.
Make your case.
I hope when the armies form, you sign up.
Yeah, that same guy says that vindicating the majesty of an insulted government by extirpating all rebels, by the fumigating their nests with the brimstone of unmitigated hell, I concede to be the holy purpose of our further efforts.
Insulted government. My gosh.
How dare they?
Yeah, so after the Civil War, it's a completely different thing. It's not, I think Foote says somewhere, it's before the war it was the United States are, and after the Civil War, the United States is. That's why I think it's a revolution. This guy, this colonel, he won. And they did it. They won. And so it's no longer a free union of states. It is whatever it is after 1865. Empire.
Yeah, it's empire.
Well, that would be consistent with the expansion west in the Indian Wars. I mean, those are imperial acts.
Yeah.
Gosh, it's a hard book.
Yeah. Foote is a master. Yeah, I said I wanted to read this on the show. This is actually in his biographical note here on page 815.
815, dear listener. 815 pages I had to read. Just want you to know that.
Every page was a delight.
It's not that. It's not that they weren't a delight. It's that there were so many of them while I have all these other things I need to read. There are a lot.
Whether the event took place in a world now gone to dust, preserved by documents and evaluated by scholarship, or in the imagination, preserved by memory and distilled by the creative process, they both want to tell us how it was, to recreate it by their separate methods and make it live again in the world around them. This has been my aim as well, only I've combined the two. He's combining the ways of the novelist and the historian, he says. Accepting the historian's standards without his paraphernalia, I have employed the novelist's methods without his license. Instead of inventing characters and incidents, I searched them out, and having found them, I took them as they were. Nothing is included here, either within or outside quotation marks, without the authority of documentary evidence, which I consider sound. Although I have left out footnotes, believing that they would detract from the book's narrative quality by intermittently shattering the illusion that the observer is not so much reading a book as sharing an experience, I have thought it proper to employ 3 dots of elision to signify the omission of interior matter from quotations. In all respects, the book is as accurate as care and hard work could make it. Partly I've done this for my own satisfaction, for in writing a history, I would no more be false to a fact dug out of a valid document than I would be false to a fact dug out of my head in writing a novel. Also, I've tried for accuracy because I have never known a modern historical instance where the truth was not superior to distortion, by any standard and in every way. Wherever the choice lay between soundness and color, soundness had it every time. Many problems were encountered in the course of all this study, but lack of color in the original materials was never one of them. In fact, there was the rub. Such heartbreak, such was here involved, came not from trying to decide what to include, but from rather trying to decide what to omit, and the omissions far outnumbered the inclusions. One more word perhaps will not be out of place. I am a Mississippian. Though the veterans I knew are all dead now, down to the final Home Guard drummer boy of my childhood, the remembrance of them is still with me. However, being nearly as far removed from them in time as most of them were removed from combat when they died, I hope I have recovered the respect they had for their opponents until Reconstruction, lessened and finally killed it. Biased is the last thing I would be. I yield to no one in my admiration for heroism and ability, no matter which side of the line a man was born or fought on when the war broke out 17 years ago. If pride in the resistance my forebears made against the odds has leaned me to any degree in their direction, I hope it will be seen to amount to no more in the end than the average American's normal sympathy for the underdog in a fight. Shelby Foote. He snuck one in there, a real nasty one, Karl. I hope I have recovered the respect they had for their opponents until Reconstruction lessened and finally killed it.
Yeah, I saw that.
Oh, God. A whole lot of people walking around, but not enough humans, and he's one of them. He's one of those humans. I don't know. What are we going to do next? This wrung me out like a rag.
I had some suggestions. I think we need something lighter than this momentous monument of literature. So I thought something short. We could do Rule of St. Benedict.
Yeah, we need to do that.
Which is short. I want to inflict more Walker Percy on you at some point. Lost in the Cosmos is fun and not a novel. And he's a friend of Foote's. I read their letters to each other. That's a book you can find. You can find their correspondence. It's worth reading. But the Rule of St. Benedict is it's short and very influential.
Yeah.
I don't know. What do you want to do?
Yeah, let's do that. We've got to do it anyway. And then we could follow that up with Lost in the Cosmos.
Sounds like a plan.
And then Volume 2.
Volume 2 is like 1,200 pages.
I know. Are you not going to read it?
No, I'm not going to read it.
Well, there you go.
But am I going to read it in a month?
No, it took a long time to get through this thing.
I got to recover from this one.
I had a hard time getting started, but once I would pick it up, I'd read 50 or 100 pages at a sit. But every time I learned pretty quick that if I picked it up, it was going to stick to me like it was like a tar baby. And I found that I didn't want to pick it up because I'd be engrossed by it and I'd have bad dreams about it and stuff. I didn't even want to touch it sometimes. I fought second Manassas several times.
The haunting thing, Johnston sending his surgeons off to help federal people who were wounded and then dying of his own wounds. The Confederate, gosh. There's a commentator that calls himself, he's not a veteran, he calls himself a war movie veteran. That's what I feel like. I'm now a Civil War account veteran.
Stonewall being offered reinforcements at Sharpsburg, Antietam, and refusing them. We've got it. Oh my God. Is there another general? Has anybody ever refused reinforcements but that guy? Ever?
I'm not aware of it.
And he's right. They didn't need it.
All right. So Rule of St. Benedict next time. Please, dear listener, if you haven't, go check out the website, onlinegreatbooks.com. You can buy some stuff from us. We have some T-shirts, which are very nice, made out of very fine cotton. You should go do that. We have the World History Timeline, which is unique. You can't get it anywhere else. You could also get on the mailing list, and join and read great books with people who will soon become your friends.
Yeah.
And might add some color to your life.
Yeah. Enrollment will be open for 1 week starting January 16th. So we do that once a month, but that's...
And don't forget about the Music and Ideas podcast with our friend Trent, who's also a member. We just completed a show on rock and roll roots, which I liked better than I thought I would. I thought it was very enjoyable. You'll learn a whole lot of stuff and some interesting theories from Mr. Scott Hambrick about the origins of rock and roll.
Was I wrong?
I don't think so. But they'll have to listen to it to find out what they are.
Yeah, it's about 3 hours. Here's what happens on those shows, Karl. We start talking, and then I'm just talking because I don't prepare. I listen to everything like once, and then I start talking, and I realize that I might be a savant, maybe. I just remember all these dates and these publishing companies and
it's weird.
It's super weird, and I don't even know what's in there, and then we start doing it. Fucking Shelby Foote. God.
Should we wrap it up? Turn off the machines.
Yeah, probably so. Hey, y'all, pass the show around. Recommend it to people. We will get some blowback from this. You can't say anything about certain things in history that are anything like contrary to the thing your sixth grade teacher tells you without catching some blowback. So go give us a review and help bury those that are sure to come that say that we're slavery apologists. We would appreciate that. And also, I highly recommend that you go to your used bookstore or wherever you get books on the cheap and get yourself a hardback set of this Shelby Foote Civil War trilogy, because I think that there is a better than even chance that you can't buy this anymore in the near future. Yeah, it's worth having anyhow. You want to have that around.
Mm-hmm.
On a snow day, one of your kids might pick it up and read a couple paragraphs, and it'd be worth having around just on the off chance that happens. So go out and get that. And any other book that you think is important, go get yourself a hard copy of it and lay it up, because you might want it one day. All right. Thank you guys so much for listening. We'll talk to you in another week.